The media is just delivering to us what we want. If we would want all positivity, they would be happy to give it to us. It's just including me. I follow a good number of positive news sites, and I often have to make myself read them because it's just so boring.
Welcome to the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we unpack the messy, beautiful intersection of creativity and business with the artists, marketers, and founders shaping our culture. Hey friends, I'm Carl, founder of Epic Made, and I'm the host of the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we share our thoughts on creativity, art, and business. Past guests include Debbie Millman, host of Design Matters, Fred Seibert, founder of The Frederator, and Robin Sloan Seibert, creative director for Nirvana. I'm forever grateful for the supporters of this podcast, and we are always open to more sponsors that align with our brand. That said, Pixel Retentive is brought to you by Epic Made. Epic Made is a strategic creative studio helping brands turn big ideas into unforgettable animated content, campaign visuals, and story-driven creative that actually connects and turns viewers into fandom. We work with the best brands in gaming, entertainment, and tech and pop culture and help make their ideas feel bigger, clearer, and harder to ignore. So if your brand has a campaign, launch, or pitch that needs to stand out, visit epicmade.net and let's collaborate on something epic. All right, so crazy excited today. With us today, we have Stefan Sagmeister, world-renowned graphic designer, artist, co-founder of Sagmeister Inc. Welcome to the show, Stefan.
Thank you so much, Carl. Happy to be here.
Really pumped to have you. And for those of you that don't know, Stefan is my personal design idol. I literally, his work gave me permission to be myself and go out into the world and really explore my own creativity, start my own studio, and just I can do whatever I want out here. Look what this guy does. It's amazing. And, so if you guys don't know about Stefan, here's a little bit more about him. Stefan is a two-time Grammy winner whose work spans album covers for the Rolling Stones, Talking Heads, to bold experimental installations exploring happiness, beauty, and meaning. Through his TED Talks and studio work, he has consistently pushed graphic design beyond aesthetics into philosophy, psychology, and the human experience. Few designers have blended art, business, and emotion and philosophy quite like Stefan. And now with his newest project, Now is Better, he turns his attention into something even bigger, the psychology of optimism, our cultural obsession with decline, and what the data actually tells us about progress, creativity, and the present moment. All right, so no small subject matter here. Now is better, right, Stefan? I love this. I love your perspective on it. So I can cue it up for you a little bit. But as I understand it, you were at some sort of fancy dinner, and a attorney friend of a friend's attorney, or someone that's an attorney, basically started talking to you about this kind of pessimistic perspective of this is the end of democracy, right? Because all of these things going on, and that's sort of sent you on this whole journey. So I'd love you to unpack some of that.
Well, meaning ultimately, but this guy said, and this was at the American Academy in Rome, where you have these salon-like dinners, and he was sitting next to me, and he said, what we're seeing right now, this was 7 years ago in Poland, in Brazil, and in Hungary, really means the end of modern democracy. And when I looked it up, I didn't say much at dinner to it, but I looked it up, I found it intriguing enough to basically go back to the studio afterwards and Google it. Modern democracy, what's the story? When did it start? And then it turned out very quickly that 200 years ago, there was a single democratic country, the United States. 100 years ago, there were 16. And now the United Nations say that there are 86 countries that are properly democratic. Now, this guy was a guy who read 5 newspapers every day, very well informed, very well educated. And it turned out that he literally had no clue about the world that he lived in. And I thought this was super interesting. This was just for a communication designer, a super juicy problem, because of course I knew that many of my friends, specifically my well-educated friends, think exactly the same. Yeah. And of course I started to do some research of why that is. And I found a whole bunch of reasons One is that in the past decades, the cycle of media of reporting has become shorter and shorter. And the shorter the cycle, the more negative the news. It's just part of that design, because scandals and catastrophes happen very, very quickly. While things that turn out to become good take normally an incredibly long time to become good, and they always fall out of that short news cycle. And this is not, what I'm talking here is not an opinion of mine, meaning like this is all factual. This is, you can see how big media companies, like there's a good study on the New York Times, how since it became digital, how it became incredibly more negative, measurably more negative.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of other reasons. We are designed, our brain with the amygdala is designed to be more open to negativity, because if we don't see the tiger, we're going to be dead. While if we don't see the banana, there might be another one around the corner. And there's a good number also of other smaller reasons, but ultimately it's all designed that we actually also, as readers and consumers of news, prefer negativity. I'm not even blaming the media. The media is just delivering to us what we want. If we would want all positivity, they would be happy to give it to us. It's just, including me, I follow a good number of positive news sites, and I often have to make myself read them because it's just so boring. And I have a very big sort of suspicion that one of the reasons, besides from the fact that, of course, journalists and media companies know that negativity will give them more click-through. They know because they've tested it, and they can see it. I also believe there is an inherent laziness among journalists. That's an opinion, that is not a fact, that I know for sure. That they know that everybody who is in the media wants to do something that's interesting. And it's just so much easier to be interesting with something negative than something positive. And it's the same, it's true for me. I recently put a talk together for a conference, and I had the idea to make the worst job that I've ever had in my life into a 35-minute presentation, just a single job. I only talk about this one job. It was so much fun to put it together, and it was so much fun to hold it, and it was super successful. Everybody wants it. Everybody wants to hear it. It's so much more interesting than the best job I've ever done in my life. And I now actually will do also a 35-minute presentation on the best job of my life, and I'll ask the audience in the beginning what they want, the worst job or the best job. I'm pretty sure they want the worst job, but I'll see.
I love that. I love it. I love how you've taken as I've, enjoyed your works over the past 2 decades that I've known about you. I love how you're always blending. There's a story. It's almost, you have a very scientific approach to some of this stuff, to the way you do design and the way you create projects. It's not, I'm going to make this book, or I'm going to make this piece of design. Like, even with Now Is Better, you have this entire rollout. It's almost like you're bringing like the magic of like campaigns and marketing to like creative storytelling, just almost for art's sake. But you have your, whatever your motivation is in that moment. But I love how it's like, you have a book, and you have the art pieces, and you have a talk, and then you have a TED talk, right? So you have a long talk and a short talk, and then obviously you do all these different things. And I think that's the real mastery for me as I've watched your career, is the way you present information, and you're threading in all this psychology, whether it's the happy film and what makes people happy, or just made you look, and like how you're getting people's eyeballs, and like all of that sort of stuff. So where do you think that inspiration came from to like, how did you learn that? Where did that strike you at some point, or is that something you've evolved for over the years, or or is it just
I
innate?
think it's ultimately the very definition of communication design. You look at a very large subject, even if you do that on a commercial level, like, you look at a company and then you really figure out how to communicate that, how to put that in a funnel and pick the pieces that are interesting to people and that define that company. Or in my case now, I look at much larger developments, like, the last one would ultimately be human development over the past 5,000 years. Now, that's a pretty damn big subject.
I love it.
And how can I make this into something that people are actually interested in? As in, they want to buy the book, they want to come to a talk, they want to see the exhibition. And I, of course, coming from design and being a communication designer, take the audience very seriously, as opposed to, let's say, many of my artist friends who couldn't give a shit if anybody understands it or watches it or so. So that's very much why I also believe, even though we do these exhibitions quite frequently in art museums or in art galleries, but I always insist that this really is design, because this needs to be functional. And by that, I mean, the desire is that the person who watches an exhibition would go out with a different opinion that they went in, that there is a change happening. That's the functionality of the exhibition. And while I know many artists who couldn't care about this, like they want to do an exhibition, but if it changes anything or there is no functionality in their mind to it, in my case, there definitely is.
I love this. Yeah, so having that intention ahead of time to disrupt somebody's thought, like, hey, you might think the world's terrible now, but actually now is better, and let me tell you why. And I love how you kind of unpack that all as I read through the whole book. Fun fact I'll share with the audience: I very rarely have the time to read. I'm all audiobooks, and I read Stefan's book, and I'm so proud of myself. Like, I graduated cum laude, like got a bachelor's degree. I don't read books. I just don't have the capacity. But I bought it, set it next to my bed, and thoroughly enjoyed it. So I will say this, as I'm reading through the book and I'm looking at the art and I'm seeing the pieces that, incredible pieces of art that were, obviously just saved for years and years and years in the I guess the attic of your family store, right? That no one ever bought, and who was going to buy portraits and these sorts of things of like random people they don't know, like even if the art quality is great. So you took them and then kind of infused this idea of visualization of data. And so like you see like right here, like this is an example of one of them where it's like these three pieces of information, these three shapes represent data from a specific subject, and everyone has a little disclaimer of like, hey, this is like people who believe that women should stay in the kitchen from 1900 to 1950 to now. So what I found interesting, and I wanted to ask, like, so as I'm reading these and looking at them, you intentionally did not give a lot of clarity on what these shapes, what year was this one, or what year was that one, and what so like that was interesting to me. I'd love to unpack some of the decision making around that from a design perspective. So
well, it's a couple of reasons. I want these things ultimately to hang on somebody's wall. So I much prefer a collector or buyer who buys it and hangs it in the living room to somebody who has a big art collection and it goes into storage.
Right.
Because the way that these paintings look, for those of you who haven't seen them, I basically originally, as mentioned, this came from my great-great-grandparents. In the meantime, I also buy quite a lot of 18th, 19th, sometimes 17th century art at small auction houses. I cut these canvases up. I literally cut them up. And I put new inserts into them that on first look might look like minimalist art, but really are data visualizations. And of course, I try to make the compositions as pretty as possible so that it would work as a painting. So that even if you don't know that it's data, it's something that you might want to hang, or that a good number of people want to hang. And because of their unusual look, I hear from people who bought paintings that when they have a dinner party, people quite often ask about this. Now, the owner of the painting, of course, would know what the data behind it is. And I've also heard that it quite sometimes opens as a little icebreaker of talking about something, because almost all of the data, I have a couple of exceptions, but almost all of the data is about something that went very well. And so this could be about obvious things, how we live much longer, but less obvious thing, how famines went down incredibly, how violence went down incredibly. It used to be 25 times as likely to be killed by the hand of another man in medieval Europe than it is now. Right. And many, many, many other things. And so, of course, I don't need, because it hangs in somebody's living room or in a gallery or in a museum, I don't need the visualization itself to be incredibly obvious. Actually, I don't want it to be too obvious, because I first want people to see the piece. Sure. And then discover more. So in museums, but we've tried out all sorts of things with QR codes, with laminated sheets in folders next to it, all sorts of stuff. What I found works best, and what we're doing right now, is that next to the piece, I handwrite the title, and I handwrite a short sentence of the content of the piece. And then we have in Z type underneath it, much smaller, the entire data, where it comes from, and so on and so forth.
I love that. Okay, fantastic. So it's just creating that visual intrigue, right? It's almost like, a visual clickbait, like, oh, what is that? Like, because it doesn't look like anything I've ever seen, or probably most people have, right? You have this classic, like, mastery of like a, 17th, 18th, 19th century, like, portraiture art in a lot of cases. It wasn't all portraiture, actually, now I'm thinking about it. But, and then these, like you said, these big, simple visualizations, and are they acrylic that you put in, like shaped
they are
acrylic?
Actually, they are wood plates that are many times lacquered and then ultimately covered with resin. Got it. So we originally, I think in the first series, we put canvas in there. So it was canvas on canvas. Mm-hmm. And then I wanted to create the difference between the old and the new even starker. So now the new inserts are really highly glossy. They are drenched in resin, so they're very, very glossy. And then, of course, the canvas itself is, matte and 18th century and sometimes quite used up and so on. Yeah.
I love it. Where can I see some of these in person? Obviously in New York somewhere, right?
I mean, of course you could, we have a studio in New York. There's a studio in the Brooklyn Navy Yard where I work with my favorite kind and my favorite number of people. We are back to 5 people, which I always thought was a perfect team size. Cool. And we are exhibiting. So we just had an exhibition in New York, what I'm working on right now, and sort of like what takes up almost all of my time right now. We're planning a big exhibition for Paris in an institution. This opens on October 15. And planning a smaller exhibition for Toronto coming up in August. Yeah.
Awesome. So how long does it take you to plan for these exhibitions? Sounds like it's a serious undertaking.
It depends, we did sort of like small, after COVID, we did smaller exhibitions because the museums really had such a strain on their budgets that large exhibitions, I felt, were very, very difficult to place. Now that we are some time away from that again, I think that chances are better. So we go back to quite not huge, but sort of like mid to large exhibitions. So let's say the one in Paris will be 10,000 square feet, which is, that's a proper size exhibition.
That's
And
huge. Yeah.
and so for that of course takes a long time to plan, because a lot of new work is being created. It's also like, of an exhibition that size, I want it to really mix up. I just don't I wouldn't want it just be paintings with inserts. So we do installations, there's some videos, there is some interactive pieces. I think we might even have an automaton in there. So there is a whole bunch of things. Yeah.
Okay. That's amazing. So depending on the size of the exhibition, you do a whole host of new things just for that exhibition. So each one is a unique experience.
Yeah. And then, of course, let's say the big exhibition in Paris, I definitely will try to have that. It's such a big expense and so much effort that I definitely want to travel that exhibition, not as it is, but versions of that. So I think we just got the go ahead that this exhibition could go or will go to Frankfurt, which would even be larger, because I know that place very well. It's a very large museum. It's a Meyer building, American architect. It's huge. So we could even do it larger. And I have experience with that before, that we travel an exhibition, but the people that see it don't have the experience that it was somewhere else. We really design it for the new space, maybe put some new pieces in there, maybe strike some pieces that I felt didn't work all that well in the previous one. So they're quite flexible.
I love that.
And we're also, I think that exhibition, or a version of that exhibition, will also come in this country. We're definitely talking to the museum at SCAD in Savannah in Georgia.
Okay.
And then it will depend, if the exhibition is super successful and has tons and tons of visitors, we usually get other museums on the plan. Like when we did the exhibition on happiness, we really traveled it to 10 different museums.
That's amazing. Yeah, well, I definitely want to check this one out whenever it pops up. So I'm here in Norfolk, Virginia, so Savannah's not too far. It could be worth a trip for sure. So that's awesome. So you spent years exploring happiness and beauty and meaning before you switched over to this project, if you will. How does Now is Better build or challenge your earlier work on happiness?
Well, I think that if you look at those three subjects, they're almost a little bit like trifecta. They definitely are connected. Probably they're connected by some sort of optimistic outlook. I really started the work on happiness out of this idea that I had done a talk where I had ordered all of the work that we've ever done into along the filter of, did it make us happy in the studio, this piece? And is there any evidence, or do we have any experience that it might have made a viewer happier or not, or unhappier? And that talk went over very well. So I thought I could do a whole exhibition, or actually the idea was to make a film on happiness. And while we were making the film, we got the possibility to really, you have it right here. Wow, you really have the whole thing.
The pitch book and
exactly. Amazing. So, while we were making the film, we got the possibility to make an exhibition about it, which became its own really big deal. And ultimately, I feel that the exhibition was probably as important as the film. We don't know the number of viewers of the film, because streaming platforms don't give away the numbers, but we do know the number of people who went into the museums, and that was very high. I think we had it at the end. We had like 650,000 visitors.
Incredible. Yeah. I mean, even like the DVD sleeve here is really cool. Got all these little bits in it. And you always like, I love that about your design. You know, as I was mentioning, as I'm coming up in design and graduating in 2007, I like the minimalism and all this like clean white space was like dominating everything. And you have always been like this photo bash, like maximalist, like handwritten. It's like, it's so awesome and authentic. And I've always loved that and resonated with it. And I just love how like even everything you do has like this depth of detail. Every little, like my favorite part about this book, Made You Look, that I don't even know if people notice this part. So obviously, you know, you got your like, you know, transformation here on the front with the I don't even know what this is called, like the old school red green filter, but I love this. Made You Look. You know, like that's so cool. You got the dog bones on the other side, and it's like just all the little things, right? Is just incredible. So the attention to detail and the extra little above and beyond, I think, has always been a little magical touch on all of your work. So just wanted to
Thank
acknowledge
you.
and
And it's
thank you
fun
for
to
that.
do it, you know, like it's just it's like, let's say, this book now is, I think this came out in the year 2000, which
Yeah.
means that this book is over 25 years old, which
Yep.
it's still in print. Like, you know, like in the design world, a design book that's 25 years old is just, I mean, that's like Neanderthal. Like, you know, that's literally, that's just, you know, the bygone areas. I mean, like, you know, like technology changed 3 times in the past 25 years, you know? So,
Easily.
and so I very much enjoy the fact, and I would say that what you liked about it, attention to detail, is probably the reason it's still in print. You know, that
It
you
is.
can go to Amazon and buy this thing 25 years later. I don't, so this again, I don't know data about this, but my guess is that there's not many 25-year-old design books that are in print.
I would guess, and maybe there's a little selfless plug for your next data visualization.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, who knows?
That could be fun. So I've got a question. I obviously I haven't really seen a lot of people do this, but like you seem to really have this propensity to like always want to do a little cool insert, and I love that. Again, more attention to detail, and I love how like you made the colors printed on the inside, so like it still works even without the book in there, and it's like all that little stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's super neat, dude. So
Well, I arrived at this format, and you know, all of our books have the same format.
yeah,
I arrived at this format because I found it's a very good format for a book that has a mixture of pictures and lots of words.
yeah,
The format gets much larger, you really can't read it on a plane anymore, or you have to sit on a table where we have too many words for this to be nice to sit on a table and like, you know, read it like this. Who wants to sit hours on a table to read it? So I
yeah,
found the format to be practical, but I also found things, let's say like the slipcase or these things are ultimately very cheap to produce, which is super important to me because I want the book to be as absolutely cheap as possible. I would have
yeah.
to look it up now, but I think it's like $26 or $28 on Amazon,
Yep.
which, you know, makes it still very affordable for young designers and students, which ultimately I always have believed is by far my most important audience, because, you know, the 55-year-old designer might buy it and put it into the bookshelf, but chances that they will read it is much less so.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And you know, they put it on the bookshelf and it's a nice thing, a little talking piece, and maybe they never read it. But yeah, you're right. The younger audience is where you're getting the most you're paying it forward the most, right? Like these things are inspiring, right? Like I can speak to that. Like again, you inspired me right out of design school. I really thought like graphic design was boring, and this was just a bunch of corporate like crap. And like, yeah, I was gonna be able to pay my bills with it and yada yada. But like I signed up. I studied art and creativity. My father was an artist, right? Like my whole house is covered in his art. I got art on the ceiling. I got 700 incredible pieces of my father's art, like Pollock style stuff, and
Wow,
and like
fantastic.
and I got these, and then I've done a whole like crazy NFT collection with his stuff. And I actually I,
Amazing.
I actually every week I do a live stream where I take old pieces of his art and I draw on top of them and I layer in his stuff. I have a whole archive of all of his work that I've preserved. He'll be gone a decade now in June. And yeah, so it's just like I keep the creativity alive, and I'm hoping to inspire other people, right? Like, and that's part of my mission as well. It's like I feel like people like you inspired me, and now I'm a middle-aged man now at this point. I'm 41, and it's like now I keep putting my message out there and hoping that it inspires the next generation and pay it forward as it is. So, super fun. So, you've always, it looks like looking through all your work, you've always had this almost obsession of merging data and design. And that obviously is visual communication design in itself, right? So how do you translate like this complex research into visual storytelling that people actually resonate with?
Well, I mean, I try to make it, in this case, very much a mixture between the general and the personal. There is, of course, value, let's say, in research. I got that from a Nobel Prize winning economist that shows that the average calorie count in France in 1700 was lower than it is in the Republic of Congo right now, which is among the three most malnourished countries on earth, which is just astonishing to me. And of
Yeah.
course, I can present this in book form just as data, and I show a visual, let's say a visualization behind it. But in exhibition form, I can do it much more directly, and we can have a pot of the classic goo that they ate in 1700 in France there on a kitchen counter, a smaller pot and a larger pot of of the goo that they're eating in the Republic of Congo right now, and carefully research recipes. And so let the visitor to the exhibition try these different stews that they had right there in the exhibition. So of course you try to create some sort of experience that makes this data or this fact more memorable.
Yeah.
And because I have the people in an exhibition there live, and I want to give them an experience that they can't have online. For example, I try to avoid screens in exhibitions as much as possible, because most of the screens you might as well, I don't know, publish it on a website. You have
Yeah.
a larger audience there. It's not necessarily to show that particularly in the exhibition, unless you have, as we will have in France, a museum that has fantastic high-res projectors installed already with a fantastic sound system in a room, and you can really make an experience in that room. So then it's a different deal. But and of course, in the talk, it could be in a presentation, it could be a different, that same data could take on a different form again, because I'm right there, which I'm not in the exhibition for most of the time. So that will always translate into some sort of different deal. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're always trying to tell the stories in ways that connect with human beings through their different experiences and senses, right? Like it's way different to see like, oh, like the Congo goo was this calories and the French goo was this calories. Now try them both. Like that like takes you like immerses you in the experience more and thinking about that. And maybe the lower calorie mid-century French goo is better on the palate, and maybe vice versa. Who knows? But that's very interesting and definitely grounds it all more in reality and storytelling in a way that just is more gripping. Like it's so much more involved than just reading some words. Words don't make you really feel things like experiencing things can. I mean, obviously not in the same way, I should say. Obviously, so words can be moving in themselves, but
I mean,
cool.
ultimately, I think I realized quite early on that definitely after the first sabbatical, that what my big mentor, Tibor Kalman, always said, that graphic design is a language, that this is really true. And it's a very powerful language that is distinct from just words and distinct from just images. That combination and that possibly that sort of desire to communicate it's very much its own direction, and you can apply it just as well, like, the vast majority of design companies, of course, apply it to commercial work, but it works just as well in non-commercial work. And I found that having done a lot of commercial work, and I'm completely fine with it, I'd have nothing against selling, but I find it just as important and just as strong and just as functional for non-commercial work. And having learned to speak that language properly, I went to school for it, I trained for it, I worked in it for a very long time. I feel I should apply it to things I find important.
Yeah, and you do it well. So I love that, and it comes through in the work. It's very masterful in all the ways that you put the brand, each thing you're working on out there. As I was talking about earlier, and you brought up something here. I'd love to touch on. This 1 year sabbatical every year is incredible. And
it's every 7 years. It's not every year. Otherwise,
sorry, 1 year sabbatical every 7 years, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Sorry if I might have fumbled that. Apologies. But yeah, so let's talk about that and unpack that, because I know that's a huge thing that you're in support of, and you've communicated often that like the value that comes out of there is so worth it. And it's kind of been, you've done it 3 times now, right? As I understand, 4 times. Incredible. And each time kind of was where you spun up the new thing you're going to work on for the next 7 years. So yeah, definitely love to get into that. So,
I mean, basically, it's turned out that if you have a year to think about things, you come up with different stuff than if you have a weekend to think about things.
Makes sense.
And it is successful on all fronts. And by that, I mean, it's successful for my life because it's a very enjoyable thing to do. It's very successful for the work because most of the work that I'm now happy that we did it, that I think was meaningful that we did it, came out of thinking that was done in the sabbaticals, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. So most of the work that I now find meaningful would have never existed without the idea of the sabbaticals.
Yeah.
Which is, amazing. And I think that it creates a couple of situations that are very necessary and worthwhile. While I believe that routines are important to get things done, I'm the kind of person that can get lost in routines, and where it's extremely helpful for me to be thrown out of a routine into a different country with a different culture, with different influences that really inject newness into it.
Sure.
And I think most importantly, when I can sum it up, is that I think the idea and the idea of the sabbaticals was by far the most efficient strategy for me to be able to still see design as a calling, as opposed to just as a career or a job. And I've seen that with many of my students, where when I first have them in class, they see design as a calling. And when I meet them 2 years after graduation, they talk about it like it's a job.
Yeah.
Happy on Wednesday that it's already Wednesday because it's only 2 more days until Friday.
And that's so crushing, isn't it, to hear that? Yeah. And I was there for a while when I had my last job, and I had a government job. I did IT work while I was still in design school. And even on Sunday, I would get like ill. I would feel ill. And I loved tech and I loved that sort of stuff. And I was still studying design at school. And I realized then that I just couldn't have a job. Like there was no way I could be employed anywhere and enjoy myself. I don't care what I was doing. And then I started my studio in design school. So I hate the idea that people's passion and like their calling, all of a sudden they find them in a place where, you know, they almost got bait and switched. Like, yeah, well, you're going to be this big creative designer and do all this cool stuff and express yourself. And no, it's like, here's the brand book, here's the thing, get it done by tomorrow. And like, we don't really care. And that's crushing. So
yeah, totally. So I really felt that the sabbaticals were super, super helpful in that direction. And I mean, you know, because I did a TED talk on sabbaticals. And so, you know, like most TED talks, that thing has millions of views. So here and there I run into somebody who says, oh, I did a sabbatical because I've seen your talk. And of course, I always ask, so how was it? And I would say all of them have shiny eyes when they talk about it.
Yeah.
It's the expression, best thing I've ever done in my life, appears in almost all of those reactions.
So, I mean, you know, in the perspective of fairness and like sabbatical sounds amazing. I'd love to take a sabbatical. How the hell do I do that? Like, how do I juggle? Like, okay, well, I have a partner. Obviously, I can't like be away for a year. How do I have a child, you know, I have to take care of him. I have, you know, 11 employees. I have, you know, I volunteer on this board for the guild, you know, I do boom, boom, boom. You know, I have a whole, you know, acre homestead that like needs my maintenance. Like, what do you say for those types of perspectives and situations? Like, how would one, do you have any advice to try to navigate some of that?
Sure.
Like maybe 1 year is not possible, but like, so.
See, before I talked to those many people that saw my talk, I was very careful. And I was like, well, I was in that specifically fantastic situation, had a small company who could do that, but most people probably couldn't. In the meantime, I talked to people that were rich who did it, people who were poor who did it, people who had families, people who were single, people who worked for giant companies, people who worked for their own. So I think I've talked to people pretty much in every situation of life, and somehow they made it happen. What all of them and myself have in common is the first one is extremely scary.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's all sorts of, and I had those, there's all sorts of things that we tell ourselves why we can't do it.
Of course.
In my case, it will look unprofessional. My parents, who were salespeople, will hate it that I opened the studio, made it successful, and now I'm closing it for a year. I thought all of our clients will leave us and we will be forgotten. Those were my 4 big scares. None of them happened, none. And I've had a kind of front row seats because the last sabbatical last year, my partner did it with me, and it was her first sabbatical, and she was scared shitless. So she had a fantastic, good, high-paying tech job, And she gave that up to do, instead of doing interfaces for virtual reality companies, she started to do in the sabbatical porcelain chandeliers. So large lighting sculptures out of porcelain. Totally different, completely hands-on. And I think now that it's all over, she's still a little anxious, but it looked like it was a great decision.
Yeah.
And she didn't tell me at that time, but she said the first 3 months of the sabbatical, she had nightmares about it.
Oh my God. Oh,
And
wow.
it's all the usual thing. I mean, she had her own set of fears,
Yeah.
mostly around monetary issues, and mostly about, now that she finally has this really good job, why give it up? You
Right.
know, it's all of those things. So I think that everybody will have their own set of fears. I can tell you, I talked to one guy who told me that it was the last day of his sabbatical. It was on a Sunday evening, and he will start his job tomorrow. And I said, so what's the job? And he said, I'm head of robotics for Google.
Okay.
And I thought, if the head of robotics for Google can take a year off in an industry that probably changes 180 degrees in a year, then pretty much everybody can make it happen.
Yeah, I can totally respect that. I think financially is the biggest barrier probably for most people, right? Like, what does that look like? And I assume you just gotta create a plan. And some of these countries are relatively cheap to, the biggest expense is flying there, right? And I just imagine some of that, but still just like, can you pay your bills for 12 months without working
That's, of course,
so.
it depends on of course, if you are now in a country that has very, very low living costs, you very much likely cannot move into a country that is the opposite. But
Right.
if you're in a country that has very high living costs, then you go into a country that has low, that's a possibility.
Yep.
I talked to one guy from Canada who had 2 young kids, and I saw his plan for the sabbatical, because he really sort of like designed it after mine, and I had a plan for the sabbatical. And in that plan, he only had about, I think, 12 hours a week that he wanted to explore certain things. But most of his plan had something to do with his children, like going fishing there. They went to a Nordic country in Europe. I think they went to the northern part of Norway or so. And in those 12 hours, he wanted to explore some sort of timekeeping system. And he was able to explore that properly, and he put it into the app store when he came back. And I think it paid him $5,000 a week. So he actually kind of designed himself out of a job, and he wasn't working for 2 years. And then I think he ultimately did go back into a more proper job because he needed the structure.
I love it. I just had a crazy idea, Stefan. Our mutual friend Debbie has this great it's right there. The Remarkable Deck, a 10-year for planning and achieving your dreams.
My
I
partner
think
actually has that on her coffee table.
I just went through it a couple weeks ago. I love it. It's incredible. And actually, you were one of the things on the list. Like, I'm going to have Stefan on my podcast, and here we are. I just emailed you,
Oh, fantastic!
and it worked out. But hey, what if there's a world where you put together this idea of like how to sabbatical, right? Like you talked about your first sabbatical. That is like you didn't have a plan, and it just sort of did, like, and then you ended up realizing that was not the lane for that you really needed some sort of structure, or would just kind of go wherever the world took you that day. So maybe and it doesn't have to be extensive, but I think there'd be some value in just getting some guidance from someone like yourself on that subject. No pressure, obviously. I'm sure you got your own ideas, but
Possibly, like how should I say this? I kind of got away from believing in self-help books.
Mm.
Not because I think their content is bad, because many self-help books, the content is great. Meaning the content is very similar to the content that you would get from a good psychologist or from a good shrink.
Yeah.
The problem is that your connection to the book, reading it in 6 hours or 8 hours, is too short for most people to actually have an impact in their lives. And I think many people come away after they read a self-help book more frustrated because they believe, oh, this book probably changed, and the cover copy might claim it did, changed many other people's lives, but somehow I'm still the same old sucker that I was before.
Yeah.
And it might even put them in a worse situation than they were before.
Potentially.
I found that, I mean, when we did the Happy film, it starts with the disclaimer, this film will not make you happy. It's like the first thing that you
I
see.
love it. I love it.
Because, and that's, it sounds flippant, but I actually totally mean it, because the 1.5 hours that you're going to watch this film it's not because the content is bad. It's because the involvement with the subject is too surface related. I
Sure.
think the content of the Happy film actually changed my life, but it changed it because I was 8 years working on that thing for the show and the film. And it was for 8 years, I was deeply involved with that material.
Right.
And so from that point of view, I'm not that hot. Look, I'm doing these things, the exhibition, the talks, the books, because I do believe that this content should be out there, because I believe it's interesting and important, specifically as a counterweight to all the negativity we get from both social and traditional media. And because I believe that ultimately social change is created by positive and negative reinforcements. And right now we have way too many negative reinforcements and too little positive. So I want to contribute a tiny little bit onto that scale, onto the other side of the scale. And at the same time, I'm of course aware of the fact that will reading the book create lasting change into somebody? Possibly not. But it's also, it doesn't claim it does.
Right.
It's not like now is better. It's not a self-help book. It doesn't claim that it will somehow, I don't know, put you into a better position, or make you a fuller human being. I do have a claim at the end of my talk that says that I recommend everybody in the audience highly to scroll less through social media and
Yeah.
read nonfiction books instead. Because by design, a nonfiction book normally takes 2 or 3 years to write, takes probably a year or two to publish. So you already have a span of 5 years. So by just that, it will be more positive, because it's already 2 steps back. A nonfiction book cannot concentrate on the stupid little scandals that happened 10 minutes ago and the
Yeah.
catastrophes that happened yesterday. It will have to have the bigger picture. So it will give you a more long-term and in many ways very valuable view of the world.
I love it. I love it. And that's so I think it's very important to take that to heart and understand that, there's definitely perspective is always hugely important, right? And
Yeah.
keeping perspective. And I think that's what you're saying here is that you're just trying to give people some additional perspective, because it can feel very doom and gloom.
Yes.
So, we are up on time, and I want to be respectful of your time here. So, last question I have for you, we have, so if now is better, what does that mean for the future of graphic design over the next decade?
But I'm also quite optimistic on it. Obviously we are in the incredible time of unbelievable technological change.
Yeah.
Design, and particularly graphic design, was always dragged into the future by technology, always, be it the way the Roman serifs came about from cutting it in stone to Gutenberg to desktop publishing and now AI. It was always dragged in there. At the time when this dragging happened, there were difficult periods because that change is difficult.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to now foresee what the actual job of the designer will be in 20 years from now, in 50 years from now. I think a nice comparison that I contemplated and possibly heard somewhere else was that if you looked at the art world in the 1870s when photography came in, and all of those artists whose job it was to represent things, be it in portraits, in landscapes, in pictures of battles, stuff that I now use to cut up for my data visualization. Those artists, of course, all thought they're going to be out of a job.
Yeah,
because photography was so much better at this kind of accurate representation that they thought they're going to be out of the job. But if you look at the numbers, and they're not quite accurate because it's difficult to really determine, but roughly in 1870 there were roughly 50,000 artists worldwide. We roughly now have 5 million artists. So there's 100 times as many artists working now than were there. Now, of course, the population also grew, maybe times 10. So even in percentage-wise, there's 10 times more artists working now than then. But it would have been impossible in 1870 to predict that art will be sharks in tanks and toilets on their sides and unmade beds in museums and all of the different directions that art really took, partially because their main job, which was to represent reality, was kind of taken over by a different medium.
And it became something else, right?
Yes,
Yeah, it's just the evolution of the crafts, and and I use that same analogy all the time. And obviously AI's got some other caveats like intellectual property theft and things that I fight with
100%.
at the Graphic Artist Guild. So
100%.
that's a whole other conversation.
Like, there is a whole bunch of problems of AI that we haven't even mentioned yet. But I do believe that certain areas of specifically graphic design will be completely taken over by the machine.
Sure.
Because I think that there are areas of design where the person who uses it really doesn't care if it's made by a machine or by a human being. If you look at, I don't know, if you look at yogurt packaging now, and if I ask people in the supermarket, who designed this yogurt packaging? They probably think a machine did, it's like the computer did or so, and they would be likely unaware that there were 12 people in meetings sweating over this thing, if that strawberry should be larger or smaller, or that logo, blah, blah, blah. And
15 years ago, that was Debbie Millman and her team with half the supermarket, right? Like
exactly. So I'm not sure if that kind of yogurt packaging will have a lot of human involvement.
Sure. Just like there's not many portrait artists left. Like it's just evolved, right? Yeah.
Exactly. At the same time, I believe that there is an incredible desire for the human made. Maybe not on yogurt packaging, but definitely on things that you hang on the wall. I mean,
Yep.
even now, I would refuse if I see a book and I know it's been written by AI, I don't want to read it.
Of course.
If it's a painting that's been made by AI, maybe with the exception if the painting is about AI, like if the concept of it is AI, and then it needs to be conceptually to be made by AI, maybe that's okay. But outside of that, I wouldn't want it. And there's another great analysis that I actually heard from Glenn Adamson, the design critic, who said that everybody is totally in awe of Usain Bolt and the fact that he can run the 100 meters so fast. And that achievement is in no way diminished by the fact that I can outrun Usain Bolt on my Vespa and on my car and on a plane and on a bicycle. I can be faster than Mr. Bolt on my bike and nobody gives a shit.
No one cares.
It's the human achievement that he achieved. And
I love that.
And that, I think, will absolutely 100% remain.
Yeah.
Possibly will enlarge. And I'm not quite sure which areas will be larger and which areas that we don't care. My guess would be the more artistic ones, we would want that humanity in there, and the more promotional ones we probably care less, would be my guess.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I'm looking forward to seeing how it evolves, and maybe we'll circle back in a few years and have a follow-up conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think ultimately it's going to be super exciting. Also, I'm looking very, very much forward to a time when AI is used to create new things that were not possible without it before. Yep. Because right now we're in that stupid phase where people make old things faster and cheaper, which is inherently practical, but totally uninteresting artistically.
100%.
But this was the same. This was the same for many other pieces of technology.
Same thing with photography, right? It took a long time before people started embracing the art of photography, I would imagine, right? Where it's like interesting angles and different perspectives and lenses and filters and all the stuff that evolved from there. But originally it was just like, hey, look, I can do your portrait in 5 seconds. Cool. You know what I mean? I'm looking forward to that too. And the enablement of I run an animation studio. So, as you can imagine, we're highly creative and we have lots of stories we want to tell. And the idea of us putting together a Pixar level team to do an animated film, just not something I want to run. Like you said, your ideal studio is 5 people. I'm probably like 10, 15 tops. And it's like, I don't want to put together a Disney size 150 person. Like, I want to see what can me and my best friends do with the best ideas and the best use of technology while also infusing every bit of our creativity. And we're doing some of that. And it's really fun to experiment with. So
excellent.
So, yes, now is better and the future is better. And I love this. And thank you so much for being on this show, Stefan. This has been a real honor and just really, really thankful, man. So, and a shout out to Ken Fitzgerald, who put you on my radar in 2007 when you did an exhibition at our school, Old Dominion University. And you just changed my life. So that was absolutely fantastic. Incredible.
Thank you so much. Perfect. Yeah, all right. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So we've been talking with Stefan Sagmeister. You can check him out at sagmeister.com. That's SAGMEISTER. But if listeners want to follow up with you directly, is there a better way?
No, I think that's all fine. Perfect.
Great. All right. Great. We'll put all the links in the show notes. Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you
so much for being on the show. We'll see you all next time.
Bye-bye.
We really hope you enjoyed the show. Please like and subscribe to join us on our next journey through the world of art and business on the Pixel Retentive Podcast.